So welcome back guys to another video, and today I want to talk about my top 5 favorite consoles. And you know, this is kind of a hard video to make because I've played a lot of consoles over the years. I've never been a loyalist to a brand or fanboy or anything like that. It's always been about the games. I feel like a console is not as good if it doesn't have the games you enjoy. So what I really thought about when I did this countdown is I thought about consoles I keep going back to, even to this day. And it's not so much nostalgia, it's just timeless classics. So my number 5 is actually a console I've never owned. I've never had this console my entire life. And you may be asking yourself, well, how is it your favorite console? Because I absolutely love the catalog this console has, and I have so much of a history with it, and that is the TurboGrafx 16. Now, TurboGrafx 16 was a console I always heard about in video game magazines. It always spoke like it was like a hidden fighter in some fighting game. I always read articles and saw pictures of the games, but I never actually got to sit down and play it. It wasn't until 2015 that I went to an anime convention that had a TurboGrafx 16 in their games room that I actually got to hold the controller and play a game on a CRT television. But before then, I got my Nintendo Wii and I went just crazy on the virtual console, buying all these games that were recommended from a lot of YouTubers I watched at the time. You know, I watched Happy Console Gamer, Splatter Trigger, Spider 1A. I watched them really talk highly of this console that I always was curious about, and playing them on the Wii console just blew my mind. I mean, I don't know, something about the TurboGrafx 16, it's like not exactly an 8-bit console, it's not exactly a 16-bit console, it's like right in the middle. So I really like the art style that the console has, I love the color palette, and I'm a big shooter fan, arcade shooters. I love those games, and the TurboGrafx 16 is like the mecca to that genre. You know you're going to get a lot of great shooters playing the TurboGrafx 16, and also games like the legendary Axe and Splatterhouse and Ease, and one of my favorite games of all time, Castlevania Rondo of Blood. The TurboGrafx 16 is something I keep going back to even to this day when I'm playing on my Raspberry Pi, and out of all the mini consoles that came out over the past couple of years, I still want to get my hands on a TurboGrafx 16 classic. My number 4 is the Sega Genesis. Now, I grew up as the Nintendo kid, you know, I had a Nintendo, I had a Super Nintendo. I had many friends who had a Sega Genesis. I grew up during the 16-bit war, and it wasn't until I was a teenager that my mom got me my first Sega Genesis, and I remember she felt kind of bad because, you know, when she got me my Genesis, the N64 and PlayStation were coming out. She felt like she was getting me some old, relic console. She felt bad about it, but I was so ecstatic and I was so happy to finally have this console and play games that I always heard about. You know, finally sit down and play Sonic the Hedgehog fully without going to a Toys R Us kiosk. You know, playing games like Super Hang-On and playing Streets of Rage and Golden Axe. It was so freaking amazing. And one thing I like to note about the Sega Genesis is I like the flat color palette. I feel like the Super Nintendo is a better console when it comes to graphics and the sound processing, but the Genesis has a certain grit, a certain like rock and roll kind of punk rock feel, kind of aura to it, and it's always made me so attracted to the Genesis. And even to this day, I find myself playing the Genesis more than I do playing the Super Nintendo. And my number 3 is going to be the original PlayStation, the PlayStation 1. This game console just helped me cut my teeth in the genres that I love to this day. I mean, you can't mention PlayStation 1 without mentioning the huge buffet of JRPGs. And I mean, I played JRPGs before the PlayStation, but Final Fantasy 7, 8, 9 just blew my mind. And also, games like Resident Evil 2 and Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver, Metal Gear Solid. I mean, I can go on hours upon hours about how the PlayStation 1 was just a huge game changer. Sony was just getting into the console market, and they came in with a bang. I just love the PlayStation 1, and at that time Nintendo was completely obsolete. I could care less about the N64 because the PlayStation 1 just blew it out of the water in my opinion. And my number 2 really took me for a ride, and that is the Sega Dreamcast. See, what's funny is I always knew the Dreamcast was a good console. It wasn't until 2012 when I had finally purchased one that I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I mean, I had just gotten out of a terrible relationship. I had more money in my pocket than I usually did, and I'm like, you know what, it's Friday the 13th. I'm going to get a console that's always been down on its luck. And I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And, you know, the Dreamcast to me is a very special console because like the TurboGrafx-16 is with shooters, the Dreamcast is like that with fighting games. And there's fighting games that were on the Dreamcast that people still play to this day competitively. It's such an arcade experience, and that's something I cannot stress enough, and I think that's what makes me love the Dreamcast, is it feels like I had the arcade at home. A lot of the arcade games I remember playing at the mall that were, you know, later ported to the Dreamcast played just as good, if not better. Great example would be Soul Calibur. Soul Calibur on the Dreamcast is actually a lot better than the arcade counterpart, which at the time was completely unheard of. I feel like my dream of one day having Power Stone 1 and 2 on modern consoles online support would just completely blow my mind. That's something I'm still dreaming for to this day. And my number one, this took me a while to think about it. I was like, man, what is like my favorite console right now? And honestly, it's a console I play a lot, and it shouldn't really surprise you guys. I actually have it right here, right off camera, and that is the Nintendo Switch. Now, what do I love about the Nintendo Switch? Why is this my number one console? Well, first of all, I feel like this is me. This console is everything that epitomizes my taste in gaming, okay? It has a great catalog of games to choose from. It's got some great JRPGs. It has some, you know, fighting games. It has, you know, the retro goodness. When people say the Switch doesn't have a virtual console, I'm like, what are you thinking about? With, you know, the Nintendo Online service and also the arcade archives and Sega Ages, I can go back to my childhood on the go, on my television. Also, you know, I'm a very busy person. I don't have time to always sit there and play a game on the television, and the Switch has actually made me game more than any other console in my previous memories, you know, because I can take this with me anywhere and play it and then take it back home and play it. I mean, games like Dragon Quest XI, something that, you know, if I was to sit there and play on the PS4, it might take me a long time, seems more realistic on the Nintendo Switch. And I love this console so much. It is my favorite. I cannot recommend it enough. And I mean, sure, the graphics aren't as good as the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, and we're about to enter a new generation of consoles, but the games on the Switch is what makes me love this console. So anyway, guys, those are my top 5 favorite consoles, and what are your top 5? Leave a comment below. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe, but also consider hitting that bell so you're notified on all future videos that come out on this channel. Anyway, guys, as always, thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, and as always, happy gaming.